Hey everybody, welcome to the webinar. This is Kyle Lacey, your host. Thank you for coming. I have some few housekeeping items before we get started. First off, thank you for coming, of course. Second, I'm Vice President of Marketing at OpenView. We are a venture capital firm that invests exclusively in expansion stage software companies. So that usually means that you're doing north of 1 to 2 million in ARR and you've found product market fit and you're trying to scale. And that's pretty much what we focus on specifically. Third is that this will be recorded. We are going to go through a lot of slides in 40 minutes. So you can take notes if you want, but just know that we will be sending this recording out, and we'll also be publishing a transcript of this webinar in the future. So make sure that you can take notes if you want, but we'll be sending it out later. This deck is also available on SlideShare, and we will include that link in the email after we send it, or when we send the recording. And also, if you have questions, please use the chat function within ReadyTalk, and we will answer it at the end of the broadcast. Mike McKnight, hello. As an example, Mike McKnight just used chat, so for all of you on the broadcast, just ask questions within the chat box. And lastly, again, thank you guys for attending. This presentation is based off of experience that I had at ExactTarget and Salesforce, all the research that we have done and I've done since in how to grow marketing teams within software companies, and how do you actually market an idea effectively in the changing environment, because honestly I think that the world is changing much faster than we all realize, and marketers are right in the middle of it. And it's really up to you guys and us in general to be able to transition and shift so that we survive a future of a lot of things that are changing and that are going to change what we do on a daily basis. So with that said, let's get right into it. Number one, we must understand change, and the best way to understand change is just look at revolutions. The Industrial Revolution, Information Revolution, what I like to call the Consumer Revolution, and then I think we're going to enter in, and we'll talk a lot about the Intelligence Revolution. And over the course of all these different revolutions, one thing has changed pretty dramatically, and that's the customer. How the customer buys, how the customer talks to you, how the customer goes about researching things. Innovation from the customer's standpoint has gone up, and you guys can pretty much figure out where marketing has gone from an innovation standpoint, in my opinion. I don't think that as marketers we are growing or innovating to the extent that that we as customers, because we are marketers but we're also customers. We also buy software. We also buy products and services. The way that we go about buying is much different than the way we actually market our products and services. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're going through this. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about why I believe this stuff is happening, and then the evolutions that we need to take as marketers to actually become successful in the long run. So why is this happening? And the number one, and you guys can pretty much guess, is that mobility is completely changing everything that we do. Americans spend a lot of time on mobile. I like to ask, for those of you with a smartphone, I hope that all of you have a smartphone. If you don't have a smartphone, then you probably need to attend a different webinar. I'm not sure if we could help you in this 45 minutes that we have. But a lot of times we are using the mobile phone on a daily basis. We are using it for everything. It is a part of our life, and it's completely seamless in how we communicate. The best example that I like to use is Amazon. And pretty much everybody on this call is probably in the software world. I want you to know that I actually use examples from multiple different types of industries, because I believe to truly be creative and innovative, you have to look outside of what you do on a daily basis. And honestly, I think e-commerce companies are on the forefront of customer journeys, quote unquote. Amazon's probably the best example of that. They've completely transformed the way that I buy things, that my wife buys things. I can basically buy formula for my son while I'm walking my dog, and it takes literally 30 seconds for me to buy something, and it's delivered same day to my doorstep. Nothing goes wrong. Nothing is lost. It's how it works, right? And the whole process is completely seamless. Nothing breaks. There's not too many clicks to get somewhere. It's completely perfect in the way that we are designing the Amazon app and the Amazon experience, and it really helps with the way that I want to interact with Amazon. Because the experience is seamless and because it's on my mobile phone, I want to use the app more because it makes my life easier, and it makes me want to use the app even more because of it. Another example is Keepsake. This is brand new, something I downloaded recently, but it was really interesting in how they built out this experience. I have a lot of pictures on my phone. I think all of you do. We use our phone as a camera now, right? What they did was they actually created an app where I could choose a picture, I could choose a frame, I can order the frame and it's delivered to my door in a couple days. Completely seamless, 4 clicks, and you have a framed picture at your doorstep. Now, that being said, it's a hell of a lot more expensive than just going into your Michaels, right? So the price is very high, but the ease of use of this app is extremely effective in terms of what you want to do using the Keepsake app. They didn't put any other frills into the app. It's just to pick a picture, to frame a picture, and to send it to you, and they built the UI around that. And I think a lot of mobile in general, we could talk about a lot of things. We could talk about the usage rates, we could talk about Uber, we could talk about all these things, but I truly believe that mobility has just begun. And a great example of that is Mary Meeker's report. I've used this for years. It's a great Internet Trends report that she does every year. It's like 200 pages of everything you need to know about Internet trends. 40% of the global mobile users have a smartphone. That's an important concept, not because 40% have a smartphone, but because there's 60% growth potential in all users, on all people that have feature phones, right, to be able to upgrade to smartphones. So as technology gets cheaper, what's going to happen is that people are going to buy more smartphones. And with more smartphones comes more Internet usage. With more Internet usage comes larger networks for people like Google, Facebook, Amazon, everybody that's investing heavily into infrastructure, even like the drones that fly around with Wi-Fi signals that Facebook and Google are testing at the moment. So as more Internet users come on using mobile phones, the network is going to get larger, and I think the second disruption is whoever owns the audience or the network owns the experience. So that's people like e-commerce companies, Alibaba, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, which is Google now, Baidu. Apple put $1 billion into an Uber competitor in China recently. And I think the whole point of all this second disruption is that the amount of money that these companies have, Apple, this has changed a little bit, right? I mean, it changes a little bit every day. Apple's market cap is $584 billion. They have $215 billion cash on hand. That basically means that they could spend the $1 billion on the Uber competitor in China, and they still have $214 billion in cash that they could do whatever they want with. And I think that's the whole point in this conversation, is that these companies that have massive amounts of cash and have technology that can compete with whatever industry they want to go in, they could do whatever hell they want whenever they want. And so it's important to know when we're talking about being a marketer and being disrupted and looking at, even as CEOs, at startups and companies that are entering in different spaces, that Amazon and Googles of the world and the Apples of the world could transition into the market, into your market whenever they want. Hopefully it's more of like an acquisition of you, right, in the long term, but you need to keep in mind that they have the ability to do that. Google, $570 billion market cap, $75 billion cash on hand. They can do whatever the hell they want, whenever they want. Another important stat, which I think pretty much shows the breadth of Google's domination, when Google went down for 5 minutes, 40% of the global web traffic dipped. So that the extent of Google owning the audience is extremely important, because when Google wants to enter a market, they have the audience there. They have the network there that they've already built. And a lot of times, a lot of people talk about Google and Apple and they discount Amazon. And I don't think that it shouldn't be something that we do very often. Most people think our main competitors are Yahoo and Bing. Yahoo and Bing maybe not as much anymore. It's actually Amazon. Said by Eric Schmidt, Executive Chairman of Alphabet. It's really important that Amazon stays in, and that's because they make a lot of money and they usually just reinvest it. $100 billion in sales last year, and a lot of that money goes directly into themselves. So they're reinvesting in things. That means that they can test things and fail miserably and still win. I mean, most of you probably don't remember the Fire phone. It was a complete failure. I think at one time Amazon was selling it for $1 just to get it out. And they transitioned and launched the Amazon Echo, and it's been extremely successful because they have the ability to pivot and change based off of their ability to reinvest in themselves and the cash that they have on hand, because they can do whatever they want. So when we're saying where are they investing, it's pretty much where they're not investing. Like, where aren't they reinvesting? So for example, Amazon's cost for transportation is extremely high, so what they're doing is they're buying a German airport. They're buying a bunch of semi-trucks. They're buying a bunch of trailers because they have to transition into transportation. We would assume the UPS and all these other major transportation companies care about that because Amazon's growing exponentially. And it's just about that shift that UPS, USPS, the Postal Service, everybody has to make in order to compete in a new world. The change is just happening much faster. Okay, the third thing, and then we're going to go into the evolutions, is the machines. When I say this, it doesn't mean that Terminator is going to come back and kill all of us, because I don't think that's the case. Let's hopefully that doesn't happen. But the machines, the bots of the world, machine learning is going to change marketers, and is going to change your careers. Is going to change the world of software pretty drastically in the near future. You know, like AlphaGo from Google, I love Betterment. I love the company. I love the idea. I love the software. It's brilliant. It's basically replacing financial advisors, and it's an automated process. The UI also is extremely nice in general, which we'll talk about a little bit later. My favorite one is Narrative Science. So it's basically machine learning, but their technology generates news stories, industry reports, headlines, and more at scale without human authoring or editing. So basically what they do is that Forbes, as an example, will send in an earnings report via an Excel file or some other documentation that they send in, or based off an API call, and Narrative Science will write an entire article without human authoring or editing. So Forbes can create a ton of these articles just by using data from earnings calls, and most of them don't need editing. And so it's pretty crazy when you think about it. I don't think that machines are ever going to be writing poetry or long-form fiction, but let's be honest. I mean, it's completely changing our environment. It's completely changing the way a lot of people do work, because these machines actually have the data to do it, and they're smart enough to do a single task. The question is, what happens when they can do multiple tasks, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then they also fail miserably, like Microsoft's very racist and sexist AI bot. If you guys need a laugh, please look up tweets. And maybe it's not very funny, but Microsoft thought they had extremely intelligent AI that they launched on Twitter, and it started making racist comments to people, and they had to shut it down. So that's one example of somebody being bad. One example of somebody being good is X.AI, machine learning company out of New York, and they've created a system that basically a robot named Amy Ingram or Andrew Ingram that will schedule meetings for you, and it's pretty crazy how good it is. They've had flowers sent to their office. They've had people ask Amy out via email, and they laugh about it and they share it because it's pretty funny in general to think about, because Amy is actually a robot, and they've built it so well, and she makes decisions based off of how you type words, and I've tried to stump her multiple times and it never works. But Amy has completely transformed the way people are booking meetings. And it's just one thing, right? But what happens when multiple things, when a robot can do multiple things, which is where the synthetic brain comes in. We're not going to get into all of these details on what could happen if a synthetic brain is built. IBM's pushing a lot, well, all these major software companies are putting a lot of money into artificial intelligence. So as artificial intelligence gets better, marketers have to be able to evolve so that we can actually use these systems the right way, because I think we're terrible at it at the moment. So this is actually a stat that's made up by me, but I think it's important to understand. 70% of your job will be automated by 2020. While there's no scientific data to back this up, I do believe as marketers a lot of the jobs we do today will be automated. So the question is, it's not necessarily a fear thing that we need to think about. It's actually about evolving over just surviving. So at the beginning of this, marketing is dying or marketing is dead or the end of marketing, like all the stuff that we talk about, I don't think that's the case. I just think that we have to evolve as marketers in order to survive in this race of data and machine learning and everything that we're given from a tool perspective. I think that it's also stunting our effectiveness. So there's a couple evolutions that I think we need to go through as marketers. Some of them are really simple. Some of them are a little bit more high level. But I want to go through each of them so that we can transition as marketers to be better at what we do so that we could sell more. I mean, because that's truly why we exist, is to sell the brand, is to sell products and services. First one is targets first, channels and tactics second. This is a pretty simple concept, but I don't think we do it very well as marketers. Targets are extremely important, but a lot of times we think about what are all the tactics we could do, and then we funnel it down to the targets. How many targets do we want to bring in? Like, what's the buyer persona? But we always start with channels and tactics because it's easier to understand. How many webinars do we want to do? How many events do we want to do? And then we funnel it down to the actual buyer personas that we want. What we want to do is flip that around and say, what are all the buyer personas? What are the experiences that they want? And then what are the channels and experience we want to give them? It seems pretty simple when you say it, but a lot of marketers aren't doing it very well. And the right target work will breed focus on your team. So as you do all this, your team's focus is extremely important because you want your team to give a shit. And your most valuable resource as a company is your team actually caring about what you do. What I've found in the past is that teams that don't have a focus, that are just doing constantly, and I would put growth hack, no offense to growth hackers out there, I completely hate the term. Growth hacking is just marketing. People that are growth hacking the hell out of their marketing team, if there's no focus, it's just tactics and channels constantly, and you're going to burn out your team. And if they don't have one thing to look at, one focus, then it's just extremely, and I think that has to do with companies in general. It's just a matter of building your focus, building your personas so that people actually care about who they're trying to connect to. So I just give you a brief example of how we talk about building those out. You start with your targets, you have quarterly goals, you have the tactics to reach those goals, and then you have the KPIs around each of those tactics, and then owners, of course, of the team. And you want to build that out to where you understand what experience people want to have, what channels you want to use, and then what are the actual KPIs for each one of those. And we're going to talk a little bit more about true KPIs because I think engagement metrics are not true KPIs, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But the point of the first one is that understanding who your buyer is extremely influential to any marketing team because you actually know who you're trying to target. It's not this massive, let's get as many leads as possible, this inbound strategy. It's actually, hey, we know exactly who we're trying to target. Here's the 500 customers we want to target. Let's target them instead of just creating content to try to get as much inbound as possible. And then you're burning out your BDR team or your SDR team because 80% of your leads are crap because they're not targeted. So it's really important that you do that type of work in order to survive. Number two is marketing is not a function, it's an experience. I think that marketing as it exists today as a team needs to change pretty dramatically. We're seeing a lot of companies move to more of a CRO, Chief Digital Officer, Chief Revenue Officer, instead of having two separate sales and marketing teams. So you have the demand gen team, you have the sales team, you have the customer success team all living under one roof. But the best way to think about it is that you have an experience side and you have a revenue side. Your experience side is very much the brand of the brand journey because despite the fact that we're all supposed to be data scientists now and despite the fact that we all should be generating revenue and we all should be quota bearing, brand is still extremely important. If you talk to anybody who was at ExactTarget, ExactTarget had a massive brand and that led to a lot of our success as an ESP. Was the brand that Tim Kopp built with Scott Dorsey when he got there. And really the brand is what influenced a lot of customers, and the customers influenced other customers. So brand is truly important, and you need people around that brand in order to make it a reality. So you have the experience side and you have the revenue side. The experience side is the brand journey for the prospect. They control top and middle of the funnel. revenue is control everything related to revenue generation. They close and upsell. So it's really a matter of how you position it. You don't necessarily need to set up your team this way. This is just the way you should think about it. So because we're all marketers, let's talk about the marketing team, the experience team. I think that having creatives, UX on the marketing team, user experience designers, UI designers, product marketing, community managers, data scientists, events, enablement, and demand gen are extremely important within a marketing team. Now this is based off of budget. This is based off of headcount. If you can only hire 3 people, I would hire a demand gen person, a product marketing person, and 1 creative. And under demand gen, the demand gen person should be content driven as well. I think we are making a mistake when we hire a director of demand gen and a director of content marketing. I think they're the same person. So if we don't have any content marketers on the call or any demand gen directors of demand gen on the call, I think you guys are one and the same. And I think that as you transition into a new role or you start seeing the changes within marketing teams, you need to understand that content should drive demand and demand should drive content. There isn't 2 separate things. Like that is what content marketing is meant to do, is drive demand, whether that's brand or whether that's actual leads. So it's important to take into account when you're building your teams to think about demand gen as content. So if you had the perfect world, a demand gen team should have an editor, a writer, acquisition manager, which is paid pretty much, ads, operations, enablement, and project management. You see enablements mentioned twice. The biggest issue that most content teams have or most marketing teams have is alignment between the sales team. Enablement of everything that you do in marketing is almost more important with internal teams than it is with enablement with external customers. Internal teams within any company, I don't care if you have 10 people or 500, is one of the more important things that you will do as a leader. We noticed at ExactTarget the conversion rate was really low. We started doing more enablement with the sales teams on the content we were creating, and we'll go into that a little bit later. And it actually drove a lot more interaction. It drove the SDR, the BDR teams to start calling on these leads more because they actually understood what was in the content and why people were downloading the content. So without internal enablement, it's really hard for people to understand what type of content you're creating, what marketing are you doing, and don't be confused. They will not read the ebook that you're creating. They will not read about the event that you started. They will not know what you're doing because they're doing something on a daily basis themselves. So it's really important that you enable teams for the future. So to wrap that up, from a marketing standpoint, I really think that demand gen and ops and numbers-driven type organizations are extremely important, and then you have the creative side as well. To drive more of the brand experience. Number 3 is forget goals, start with continuous rapid improvement. I don't necessarily mean forget goals. I'm being a little extreme if you haven't noticed already. One of our values at OpenView is continuous rapid improvement. So that means that we try to change constantly. We are constantly talking about what we could be doing better, what went wrong yesterday, what impediments do we have, like how do we actually exist and be better day after day after day so that we're continuously improving. I think that yearly goal setting and quarterly goal setting is really hard, and I think that it's really hard to do if you want continuous rapid improvement. That doesn't mean that you don't do it. You know, you need to set goals for your team. It just means that you are reevaluating those goals on a weekly basis. And when I say reevaluating, it doesn't mean that you look at the goal and say, well, that seems too high. I need to lower it. Reevaluation means you're always setting the goal higher because you realize that you've done something better. I think the age of let's set a quarterly goal and that's the goal we need to hit is fleeting. I don't think that it will be around for much longer. I think that depending on if you're a public company, it's way different. But for startups, like I truly think you need to be transitioning and changing goals on a weekly or monthly basis so that you're driving your team faster. Company-wide goals should be set at the beginning of the year. Make annual and quarterly goals, but understand they are not set. Your team evaluates them. If you're an agile group, everybody that joins OpenView has to become a Scrum Master here. Do 1 or 2 week sprints for projects. We do it sometimes on the marketing team, but it's more about those 1-week planning sessions where we're doing specific things 1 week and moving on the next week. You should test something every week. A/B test emails, A/B test landing pages, A/B test anything. Just make sure you're testing and changing something every week. And then have a retrospective where you're adjusting weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually goals based off of performance from the last part. So weekly, you should be evaluating goals, adjusting goals based off of performance the week before, but make sure that you're constantly evaluating and changing. So just make sure from a continuous goal setting standpoint, you are constantly looking at your goals. From a tools perspective and how we build this out, we use BetterWorks internally. It's a great system to use for a waterfall type goal setting system within a company. Salesforce did this really well. They didn't use BetterWorks. They had a system built into the actual CRM. But it was basically Mark Benioff made a bunch of goals, and then you could track his goal all the way down to your goal at the bottom of the rung. BetterWorks does that really well. So if you're looking at a goal setting tool, BetterWorks is a great tool to use to do that within teams. Trello we use for project management. We use to create tasks on a weekly basis for the team. We meet every Friday to plan the week ahead, and we use Trello to help manage those systems. So BetterWorks and Trello are two systems that we use to help manage numbers, to help manage data, to help manage our goals. You know, it's a little bit different depending on what industry you're in, what type of business you're in, but understanding that you have the ability to change goals, to up goals based off of how your team's performing is fairly freeing. So it's a matter of how you do that that's important, and it's a matter that your team's involved with that and they constantly want to get better at what they do. All right, fourth thing, don't read an audience, own it. We are big fans of a company called Mighty Bell. Their founder, Gina, actually was the founder of Ning.com, and I think that she was extremely early in her thinking of owning niche networks. I think we're finally getting to the point where engagement on massive, dominant social networks is starting to wane. So you have the dominant networks, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Messenger, Snapchat, all these things that are coming up. And then you have single-player apps from the mobile environment, and they're usually 75% of these apps, Keepsake would be one of them that I talked about before, are never used again. So you have these apps that you download on your mobile phone that you never use, and then you have these apps that are community-driven that people use all the time, but engagement's starting to wane, and you don't necessarily own the network. So there's massive opportunity for niche identity networks. Ning was a great example of this in the past, where you could go create your own Facebook, and you ran that Facebook, and people joined, and you had the ability to communicate with people. It was a little bit early, but I think people are getting to the point where they want to be more involved in niche networks. Mighty Bell is a mobile-first niche network. There are plenty of network providers out there, but I really think that if you own your audience, if you own your network, much like Amazon or Google does, and it could be any type of community. HubSpot has a great inbound.org community of customers and attendees of their conference that talk on a daily basis. But actually owning that environment is extremely important. If you can build an identity network, you should do it. If you have a niche product or service and you have the ability to put people in a community in order to get them to talk to each other, it's extremely important that you do that. And Mighty Bell just makes it way easier than the other massive network providers have done in the past. So that's just one example. It's a fairly simple one, but it's something that you guys could use tomorrow if you wanted to. Just go to mightybell.com and check it out. The fifth one is UX experience matters. UX matters a lot, and I don't think that as marketers we talk enough about it. A simple thing, which I see all the time, is if I'm on your website, your phone number on your contact page should be clickable. Like I should be able to click it and call you. If I have to click more than 2 times to try to figure out what you do, then your UX is bad. And most of the time, companies are terrible at it, absolutely terrible at it. But the point about the experience in the UI and the product is if you get the products right, it will sell yourself, or your customers, it will sell itself, or your customers will sell it for you. And that's extremely important to know. If you build great UI, if your website is really easy to use, If your product delivers on what you sell it for, your customer is going to either upsell themselves to you or they're going to sell you to their peers, right? And most of the time, customers are friends with other customers. We've all seen these at conferences. Like, that's how it works. So if you get the experience right, it will sell itself. Betterment's a great example of that. I talked about it earlier. Betterment has a great UI. It's really easy to use. It takes me 6 minutes what a financial consultant took 6 months to do. Like, it's truly revolutionizing this industry. It's because it's easy to use. It's easy to use on a mobile phone. It's easy to use on a website. It's product first. They use their product as their go-to-market strategy. And I think that's a fairly new concept for a lot of people, but companies like our portfolio companies like Expensify or Datadog, our product as a go-to-market, their product is so good that it sells itself. And so UX matters, the product matters. Are you solving a problem? The product market fit, all this stuff works, but UX is really important. And I don't think that marketers spend a lot of time on UX for like landing pages. I mean, I would say that from an OpenView perspective, we're about halfway there. We need to do a lot of work from the UX standpoint. But marketers should be just as crazy about UX as you are trying to look at your analytics reports in Google or in whatever analytics tool you're using. You should know how people use the website and why they want to use the website. And 1% of companies deliver an exceptional UX experience, which means that 99% of us suck at it, which is understandable, right? But it's up to us to try to map the journeys on our website, to try to understand how people use our website. Usertesting.com, and full disclosure, is a portfolio company of ours, but they are a great resource to go check out to actually learn how to map your customer journey on your website, to test that. They have massive millions of people that do website testing for them. So you can actually buy panels of people and people in your demographic mix or your buyer persona, and they will use your website and give you live feedback on what made sense, what didn't. Demos are a good example of that. You've got to figure out the actual journey of a video demo as an example, like when do people drop off, when do they click, do you have CTAs within the demo reel, like that type of stuff that you need to keep in mind when you're talking about UX, but actually mapping out each of your customer journeys are important. My favorite example of a customer journey and the breadth of a customer journey is airlines. They have massive amounts of different touch points that are happening within their customer journey, and I think it's not similar, but the same concept applies to software. Like, you have a ton of different, like the login page is a great example, the contact us page on your website. What happens when somebody calls your office? If I have to wait for 3 prompts and then try to figure out what your extension is, the experience is broken, and guess what? Marketing should be on the hook for that. Marketing is the end-all experience managers for the brand, for the software. And so all of these touch points, when somebody walks in your office, who's smiling at them when they come to the front desk? All of the stuff that's happening is part of the brand, is part of the experience. All these things matter. And I don't think we're doing a very good job as marketers in tracking all of it and mapping all of it and putting processes around how people become aware, use our product, repurchase our product, and become advocates. There's plenty of marketers that are doing really well in some of these boxes, but we need to be really good at all of them. And that's just a step that we have to take in order to do it. Evolution 6, we got 2 more, then we're done. It's not content marketing, it's thought leadership. We talk a lot about content marketing. I think great content marketing is great thought leadership. And I'm going to give you like 4 examples of what we did at ExactTarget to truly build that. But the first point that you have to remember is that thought leadership is not about you. It starts and ends with your customer. I think too many times content marketers create a lot of content that has to do with the product, and that's needed, and I think that it's important, but you shouldn't be doing it all the time. And so thought leadership, in my mind, has 4 different types. You can choose to do all of these types or choose to do one of them, depending on your budget and resources. But 4 types of thought leadership or content marketing. There's experience, user, peer, and benchmark. I'm going to actually go through each of the examples and give you, or each of the types and give you examples of them. So from an experience standpoint, become the prospect's customer. So I'm going to give you an exact target example because this is where, Jeff Roars was my boss. He's now CMO at Yext. He's the one that came up with this idea of this, the publication, subscribers, fans, and followers, and Retail Touchpoints Exposed was one of those reports in this series. But it was experiential, and it performed really well for a couple reasons. But I'll give you a background of what we did. So we knew that retail was a good vertical for ExactTarget, and we had these top 100 fastest growing retailers in the country from the Internet Retailer Report. And so we said, you know what? Let's get the salespeople involved. Let's try to experience how people interact with this brand on a daily basis. So we bought gift cards. We got salespeople. We said, hey, will you go shop in store, use this name, use this email, track touch points within the store, buy an item. If they ask for your email at point of purchase, give them this email. And then my team went and bought something on their website if they could. Most of them had e-commerce solutions as well. They bought something, used the same email. We went to their website, tracked a bunch of different touch points, and then we watched what they did over 90 days. And we developed a system of tracking how they were interacting with us based off of what we bought both in-store and online. And we created report cards off of those and gave them to the sales team to use as outbound. So when we were calling into a CMO of a major supermarket, major retail store, we're not saying, hey, did you download the retail touchpoints report that has blah, blah, blah. We were saying, hey, we have a report card on how you interacted with us over 90 days, and guess what? We have report cards for all of your competitors as well. Would you like to talk to us about how you could change your customer journey for the better? That's a terrible script, but you get my point, right? It worked extremely well. And the reason it worked extremely well is because we weren't creating another piece of content that were like, top 10 ways retailers can make better emails. We were saying, hey, we understand your business because we experienced it, and this is how we can help you do it. You can't buy better demand gen than that. The tailored reports led to a ton of outbound, led to a ton of interaction between CMOs and our sales teams, and led to a ton of content for presentations and thought leadership because we spent time and energy doing it. And guess what? Because I had designer and writer, it was fairly cheap to do. The only cost was the gift cards. So we built an experience research that actually drove interaction with top of the funnel, the CMOs, and then we pulled all the data into one report, Retail Touchpoints, that drove the email marketing manager. So the email marketing manager was downloading the report, and the CMO was getting a report card from our field sales team. So it was extremely important when it was building out interactions between all points of the business, but it was fairly easy for us to do, and it was very experiential. The second one is user research. This is expensive, but it was extremely effective in what we were doing. We wanted people to know that we understood user usage, quote-unquote usage of mobile phones, of social, of email. So we would go out and we would survey thousands of customers in each of the countries that we had offices and say, hey, this is how 10,000 Brazilians use email. This is what they think of email. And it was extremely effective with a lot of our brands because we were saying we understand the consumer that you're trying to sell to, especially B2C brands on consumer products, like people that wanted to understand the populace of a country or a city. We had the ability to produce that content for them. And again, it led to using stats in our keynotes. We could say, 85% of people in the United States open emails from a retailer. Like we had that survey data in order to support it. But it took a lot of time and energy for us to do it. Peer research is the third one. We all care about our peers. State of marketing reports, state of analytics, state of sales, all of these were bred from the idea that we wanted to interview peers, other marketers, to understand what they were going to spend their budget on, what they were trying to do with email, social, mobile, like everything you could possibly think of that was a channel, and we wanted to understand what they were doing. So peer research was extremely effective as well because we had the ability to drive interaction and drive success
because people wanted to understand what their peers were doing. All of this research that we produced, we were driving about 15 million in pipe a quarter, and 80% of our press mentions as a company was from our research. Most press want to write about survey content. They want to write that you understand about the customer. They don't want to write about your product release. Okay, I want to be very clear about that, especially for the software people. Press, journalists, want to write about great stories. They want to write about massive research reports that you've done, or you truly understanding the consumer, not about your product release. So if you have this research that you're producing great content, you're going to get more press mentions because of it. So on a quarterly basis, about 80% of all of our press mentions was because of our research. Last one is benchmarking. A lot of software companies are really bad at doing this. You guys all own data on your back end. ExactTarget was not good at this as well. You want to be able to create reports based off of your usage, your customer's usage of your product or service. If you are a customer support software, you want to be able to say, this is X amount of time it takes this person to do this, because we have the best customers that use our product, and we can actually drive them to be better at what they do. So as an example, at ExactTarget, we wanted to be able to send, hey, out of the 30 billion emails we're sending a year, at 8 p.m., this is what the open rate is for retailers. It was really hard for us to do, but that's the idea, is that if you are the best at what you do from a company perspective, you should be using your data to drive interaction and leads and thought leadership, because you know what you do on a daily basis. So thought leadership is extremely important. Those four are what we mainly focused on as a content team at ExactTarget and then at Salesforce. And that really drove a lot of leads and a lot of first touch attribution for the content team and for the marketing team, because we were producing this type of content. And I truly think that it's beneficial. The point is that thought leadership is not the sales pitch, it supplements the sell. You want content to be a supplement to the sales team. You want your content to be able to be used as a way to upsell a customer, because they believe that you are the thought leader in your industry, not just another person creating another tips piece of content. That's what content marketing is, in my opinion. You've got the data sheets and everything that's used to help sell the product. I think that's another thing, but I think that is product marketing's role. And I think the content can help support that, but the content marketing team in the demand gen world should be creating thought leadership that can be used for press, that can be used for keynotes, and can be used from the sales team's perspective in order to drive targeted leads. A ton of inbound's great, but targeted is even better, because you actually know what you're doing, you actually know what you're driving, and you know who you're driving against. And that's extremely important to remember from a content team. All right, the seventh one, die engagement metrics, long live unit economics. We're almost done. Marketers in general, I think, spend too much time on engagement metrics. Marketing should act like an e-commerce company. I think e-commerce companies are the best when it comes to reporting and analytics and understanding what customers are doing, because they truly dig deep. They truly understand what a specific customer spent, what they spent 6 months ago, and what their potential of spending is 6 months in the future. And I don't think software companies do a great job. I don't think many marketers do a great job at truly understanding the unit economics of a business. This is something that I didn't quite understand until I joined a venture capital firm. As marketers, if you have the ability to, you should understand the unit economics of a business just as well as your CEO does. And CEOs, you need to understand unit economics. I don't think I need to explain that to you. Unit economics of a business is what drives the success of a business. Engagement metrics are secondary. My favorite quote that I've used for years, I heard it in Australia when I was down there for a conference. We must move from numbers keeping score to numbers that drive better actions. And I think understanding the unit economics, and I'm going to go over a couple of these, the unit economics of a business is extremely important to driving action instead of just checking a box. Oh, we reached this goal, great. But how do we drive better actions for the future? So in that world of continuous rapid improvement, it's important to understand unit economics over engagement metrics. Engagement metrics are like open rates, click-through rates, cost per click, time on site, bounce rate, all these things that are more about engagement than they are what's actually driving true success within a business. So that, like I said before, they're secondary. CAC, LCV, LTV, payback period, customer retention, all of these numbers that your CFO knows, that the CEO knows, that your Vice President of Finance knows, you should know as marketing. You should understand, out of all the leads we created and all the ACV we created as a marketing team, what were actually the unit economics of those customers that came in from marketing leads. Most of the leads are from marketing, right? So how do you understand which buyer groups are right, which ones are churning? Like, you should be able to you should understand those numbers just as well as the CFO, because I think it makes you better as a marketer. And so I have some definitions, of course: customer acquisition costs, lifetime customer value, payback periods, customer retention. These are only 4. There's plenty, and I'm sure your your finance team would be thrilled for you to take them to lunch and learn more about what the unit economics are for your business. But you should know what the churn percentage is of the leads you brought in, based off of your sales, based off of how long your sales cycle is. You should understand, did we have a percentage of leads that churn fairly quickly, so that you can help with enablement of, maybe it was the onboarding process, maybe the leads were wrong, maybe you need to talk more to sales about how they're going about handing it off to the account management team. Like, marketing should be involved in all this stuff because it's all part of the experience. Because guess what? If onboarding's wrong and the customer you work so hard to bring in is pissed off, you can't get them on camera, or you can't get them as a case study in the future. So it's extremely important that you understand, or you're at least involved in a conversation around the unit economics or the onboarding of a customer, because you want to create the best customers possible for the business, because that's why you exist as marketers. Okay, last one. Data cleanse for healthy artificial intelligence. At OpenView, we have a team called the expansion team, 15 people strong. All we do is work constantly in our portfolio companies. So we are constantly involved with them, helping them hire the best talent, acquire the best customers, retain customers. Like, that's our job. That's what we do. And the one thing that we see the most of, and this is also with prospect companies that we are constantly looking at on a daily basis, is just data cleanliness. It's extremely important that sales has a process around data, that marketing has a process around data, because all of these cool artificial intelligence things are going to come out, these machine learning, these bots, these things you can plug into your CRM, and they're all going to break because your data's crap. So it's extremely important that we take into account that data cleanse is one of the more important things that you'll do. 4,300% increase in annual data generation by 2020. We know this. There's going to be a lot of data created. It's going to be a lot of issues. Most CRM implementations break because of bad data. You install a Marketo instance and it breaks because your company profiles within Salesforce are all screwed up. Like, this stuff happens on a daily basis. It's important that if you're an early stage company, that you're spending a lot of time around the processes. How's the BDR team entering in information to Salesforce? How's the marketing team entering information into your CRM? How are you using HubSpot, ExactTarget, Pardot? Like, how are you using all of these systems, and do you have processes around how you do it? Because without process, it's going to break constantly. And it's a difference between small data and big data, and I actually hate it. I hate the definition, because I don't think that there's any difference. The only difference is that small data, you can use Excel, and big data, you break Excel. And if you're breaking Excel, you probably should think about a system of record in order to store your data. And honestly, from a marketing perspective and a sales perspective, you guys should not be using Excel files. You should not be using Google Sheets to track all this stuff. It should be in one system of record so you guys can track what you're doing and what works. Because if you have a bunch of salespeople using their own systems, you don't have one system of record. You don't have one look at what's happening. You don't have one way to tell what's going wrong. You just have a bunch of different spreadsheets that you have to look at because the system wasn't built or the process wasn't built. Big data is like teenage sex. Everyone talks about it. Nobody really knows how to do it. Everyone else is doing it, so everyone claims they're doing it. Big data is great. Data management is great. but truthfully it's about process. Building process with your team, building processes in terms of how you track all these unit economics and this data around your business and what makes it successful is truly what's going to help you scale. If you don't have those systems in place, it is going to break along the way, and it's going to be more headache than you want. So in order to efficiently manage data, you should cleanse your data on a fairly regular basis. I'm not sure how often. It really depends on your business model, but you need to have database cleansing be part of your system and process. Get your team off spreadsheets. One system of record for the entire company. Good luck with that. It's really hard to do. But it's important to do as a marketing team and as a business that wants to grow extremely fast. It's really important that you have one system of record. And then process. I think marketers that are highly creative people, I think marketers tend to be less process-oriented than most. And it's really important that you are, because the world is becoming more process-oriented. Data management is becoming more important. That's why, if you think back earlier, I had data scientists as part of the marketing team or an ops person, because it's extremely important that you have an ops person in the very early stages. There's some companies that we're talking to that just hired a marketing leader that we're saying your next hire should be ops, because you truly need to understand that operations is extremely important to your business, and the enablement of sales and marketing ops is important. In terms of demand gen, in terms of growing a software business, is that ops is extremely important. So one last thing, and then a lot of you marketers, we might have some CEOs on the call. It's really important that we understand the experience is something that drives everything. You are experience makers and managers. Like, that is your role. The customer experience is the most important thing you can possibly do in your business, and understanding the customer experience, making it the best possible, is the most important thing that you can do. The creation and management of the customer experience is the only thing that makes you relevant. If your experience is broken, you are less relevant than your competitor that makes it better. So when I'm talking about marketing is dying or marketing is dead, it's not that I think that marketing is going to die. I think that it's evolving to be more of experience managers than it is just marketing. And that involves everything from sales to the culture of your business to customer success. Like, it is something that you should be truly involved in on a daily basis. And so the management of the experience is extremely important to what you do, and it's really truly the only thing that makes you relevant at all. So with that, that is all I have for you guys. We will have a recording sent around later. If you guys have questions, go ahead and put it into chat. I noticed that hopefully the audio wasn't terrible for a lot of you. We have a couple. Hold on one second. A lot of good B2C examples, but how about B2B marketing? Any differences, insights? I don't agree with the concept that B2C and B2B are different. I think that sales cycles are different, but you're still trying to sell an idea to an individual. The examples that I had about thought leadership were all B2B. ExactTarget was a B2B company, B2B software company. I truly believe that if you manage your customer journey the way that an airline does, or go talk to a VP of marketing at like a Travelocity, or go talk to a head of marketing at some major retail brand, the way they think about the customer journey, the way that Nike thinks about you walking into the store, you buying a shoe online, the emails that you get, I think that software could learn a lot from that. I think they could learn a lot from how consumer brands build identities around buyers and how they actually deliver communication to them. Like, when I onboard on a software, it should be personalized to my use case. Plain and simple. Just like when I buy a shoe from Nike, all of the communication to me after that fact is personalized based off of my buying behavior. So I think that we could learn a lot from B2C. That's why I use them as an example, but it's truly just innovation in general that's important. I think one of the other questions that come up, and then I'll cut it off. I know I talked about 4 thought leadership, 4 content marketing ideas. If you could pick one type of thought leadership to do, what would it be? I really think that first one, the experiential research, is important, and it's something that you could do fairly simple. I think a lot of times content marketers in general spend too much time trying to think about inbound. Like, how do we produce one report that could drive a ton of leads that we could then give to the BDR teams that they could call on? Instead, you need to understand your buyers, you need to understand your target market, and you need to say, hey, even if there's 2,000 small businesses we want to target, we know who they are. So here's the content that we're going to produce to get the experience that they want so that they're more involved. And that's just something that takes a lot of time and energy, but it's something that's extremely beneficial to what you can do. And it's not about growth hacking something, it's about actually being involved in something and understanding how the customer wants to experience your product or service. So Wade, you asked where can I get this presentation? This will be emailed to you. If you guys go to slideshare.com/Kyle Lacey, you can find it there. But you will also have the link that once Casey will send an email around to everybody, you'll get the recording, and then we'll publish the transcript later on. So thanks, everybody. A lot of slides and 50 minutes, but I appreciate all of you for being here. And if you have any questions, please email me, tweet me, LinkedIn, whatever you want. I'm always available. So thank you.